what it's like to be an Arsenal fan, coming on here after a game where it doesn't go your way and you're moaning about the referee. But Lord Almighty, were Man City robbed in that game against Monaco. A 2-2 draw from a position where City looked pretty comfortable, and on another night probably should have scored 4 or 5, hit the bar twice, their goalkeeper making a few decent saves. What happens? A ghost foul, a foul that doesn't exist, gets given against City, and the penalty, well, the Spurs curse lives on. Of course it does. Even when the players aren't playing for Spurs, they still somehow find a way to haunt Manchester City. Welcome back to the City Ramble. A rapid review of that Monaco game. Second game of the Champions League season. Ends in frustrating fashion for the Blues. But is the head loss in terms of the performance deserved? We'll speak about that. In the meantime, though, if you're new, make sure to be subscribed and make sure to be getting on all of these City Ramble social medias as well. Plenty of stuff going on. Also, if you don't, we're a podcast as well, a Daily Manchester City podcast, so you can get us on your podcast feeds. Okay, let's start in that first half, because there were plenty of positives from a City point of view, weren't there? Especially from Erling Haaland. I thought, yet again, everything he touches in this competition turns to gold. What is it now? 52 goals in 50 games in the Champions League, which is just absurd for a 25-year-old. Anyone who has any doubts about him has been firmly taken to the cleaners, because he does his job. He's fantastic, and how can you complain when you've got numbers like that? On the most part, to be fair, in that first half, City really good. They take the lead, they're on the front foot. An absolute worldie out of nothing from Monaco sort of gets them back into the game, and it sort of sparks a fire in them a little bit. And to be fair, even after that, there was maybe 2 or 3 minutes where City looked a little bit wobbly, but at the same time, for the most of that second half, right up until Haaland gets his second goal, City were controlling possession well. They were camped on the edge of the Monaco half. They were sort of looking for openings. Thought Phil Foden was looking super bright. He was dictating play. And then again, Nico O'Reilly with a sumptuous cross into Erling Haaland. And if Erling Haaland can unlock the heading DLC, it's over for everyone, because that's the only sort of weakness in his game in front of goal. And if he can unlock that heading ability, wow, that would be special. That would be really special. But on the whole, I think in that first half, you can't really have that many complaints. Away from home in Europe, yes, they had quite a few players out, but even still, you can't. Against the fourth in Ligue 1, for example, the no pushovers Monaco at all. You can't sort of approach the games the same way as you do when you're playing at home. It sounds daft, but it's just this competition. You do have to approach certain games differently. Second half comes along, and I've seen a lot of people speak about how they wanted City to sort of take the handbrake off at the start of that first half, go out, excuse me, get the third goal, get the fourth goal, put the game to bed. And yes, don't get me wrong, the energy was certainly, dropped off a little bit. It wasn't full sort of, as intense maybe as we've seen from previous City teams. But at the same time, Tajani Reinders, he hits the crossbar. Phil Foden, he hits the crossbar. I don't know if that was the first half or the second half. Can't quite remember. But even still, City hit the crossbar twice. Haaland is, pretty quiet for that second half, I think it's fair to say. But he has a shot that the goalkeeper does a great job of saving. He gets down low for that. Doku sends a cross into the box. That rebounds off one of the Monaco defenders. That could have gone in their own net on a different day. Possibly wasn't necessarily that impressed when Savinho came off the bench. Thought he maybe had to do a little bit more. I'd have preferred to, I'm pretty sure he was on the bench, but I'd have preferred to have seen Oscar Bob in that situation instead. But yeah, Nico Gonzalez, for example, comes on, he replaces Rodri. Rodri plays an hour, and Nico sort of slots straight into that role. He's playing some nice passes, he's looking sharp. And then, the game's coasting towards the end. Donnarumma makes a good save, to be fair. Sort of a flash save out of again, another Monaco chance that came out of nothing. I've seen people describe it as inviting pressure. I just don't think that's the case at all. Again, away from home in Europe, you can't maintain the intensity that you would in a home match. You do sometimes have to sort of concede a little bit of possession. We've seen, go back to 2023 when City won the treble. All of their away matches in the knockouts and even in the group stage as well, I think they only won one game away from home, and that was the Sevilla one, right at the start of the Champions League. They drew against Copenhagen, I think I'm right in saying. They drew against Dortmund in the group stage. They drew against Leipzig. They drew against Bayern Munich, and they drew against Real Madrid. You know, that was the best ever team in European football for City. What did they do away from home? They struggled at times, or they played a little bit more conservatively. Obviously, in this situation, it's frustrating because City had the lead twice, and Monaco aren't as good necessarily as some of those teams. But I'm not buying the head loss surrounding these performances. That City, people saying City were bad, they didn't deserve to win. Erling Haaland as well said that he didn't think City deserved to win, which I thought was wild because City played a game against Monaco that was good enough to win them the game. Just as it goes, it didn't happen in the end, which is annoying. It's frustrating. I get that. What you can't legislate for is the referee having a bozo moment of himself and giving a penalty for a foul that, quite frankly, doesn't exist. There are so many reasons why this is not a penalty. First of all, if you look at some of the replays, Eric Dyer's sort of jostling with Nico Gonzalez. I think he's got his arm on his shoulder. It's a 50-50, whatever. Second of all, Eric Dyer's head actually stoops down, I'd say, the best part of a foot. In length, probably like half a metre, something like that. And it gets to a situation where, of course, Eric Dyer's head is near Nico Gonzalez's foot because Eric Dyer has put his head there and almost headed Nico Gonzalez's foot as a result. He goes down holding his head as if he's been, head-butted a brick wall or something like that. The referee was atrocious all of the game, and not just for City. Some of the decisions was just so soft. He wasn't allowing the game to flow at all. He completely loses control. The VAR sends him over to the monitor, shows him, the situation in uber slow motion, doesn't represent what actually happened. Nico Gonzalez looked like he actually got a touch on the ball, if we're being honest. And again, just a foul that isn't there, and he gives a penalty, and the rest is history. Frustrating. 2-2. Not much you can do about it. There was possibly a couple of minutes to go and snatch a winner at the end. I think Gvardiol had an opportunity to slide Haaland in, and he had a shot instead. We probably should have gone for the pass, but you can't legislate for that sort of stuff. Pep Guardiola really angry, really animated with the referee at the end. I think he sort of speaking to him as they went off the pitch, said in his press conference that, don't ask me questions about Spanish referees or something like that. Bernardo Silva saying that Eric Dyer dived. And it's true, Eric Dyer's should be, owning up to that. He's bought a penalty, and fair enough. If you can get away with it, you can get away with it. But there's just not a world in which it is a penalty. And I feel sorry for Nico Gonzalez because that was a really good performance from him off the bench, and he's having the finger pointed at him when it wasn't his fault at all. People say, well, he shouldn't go with his foot. Don't give the referee a decision to make. Well, as a defender in that situation, he has to go with his foot, because if he goes with his head, because of the height of the ball, he's just heading it into the ground. Eric Dyer can afford to stoop down and try and head it into the ground, because as an attacker, that's a much more threatening effort at goal, so to speak. Nico Gonzalez has to clear that as far as he can, which is why he goes with his foot. If he's going with his head, he probably loses the header anyway, because the trajectory just wasn't, it wasn't on there. He's got to try and find a way to get to it. That's one of the worst decisions I've seen in a City game for a very long time, which is really frustrating because, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a vintage City performance. I'm still looking for big improvements, and I'm sure they'll come. But at the same time, given where City are, step in the right direction. We're starting to see some positive performances from likes of Doku, Tajani Reinders, Phil Foden, I thought was good again. Rodri, more minutes in the legs for him. No surprise that he got taken off. Obviously still a little bit rusty, but that's why you've got Nico Gonzalez there, because he can step in and he can do that role. Some question marks, don't get me wrong. Yes, it's okay saying that on another day the game finishes 4-1 with City taking those chances, but they didn't take them chances. So, it is what it is. Maybe they should... at the same time, I don't. When people say, "Oh, you don't take your chances," like what is the cure to that? I don't know if I can ever use that as a massive criticism, because, like, for example, against Burnley, City took the chances and it went 5-1. What was the difference there? They got 2 own goals. They got the slice of luck in the Burnley game. They hit the bar twice in this match. They didn't get the slice of luck. It is a little bit swings and roundabouts. It's a long old season. City is still unbeaten after 2 matches in the Champions League, which, to be fair, they were still unbeaten at this stage last season. But I would say performance-wise, it's much more positive. We're unbeaten in 6, by the way, since the international break. A tough game against Brentford on Sunday. That's going to be a real test for City. But at the same time, the way that City are playing, hopefully they can go there and get a positive result. Blues, I'd say it's okay. It's all good. It's one of those frustrating results that happen a couple of times every season. We've got to take it on the chin, blame the referee, as I have done plenty of times. And spare me the comments of, don't be blaming the ref, we've got to do better, blah, blah. When the referee gives a penalty in the 90th minute or whatever it was, and it's just never a penalty in the world and your team's leading 2-1, then yeah, you can blame the referee because that game was decided by that referee decision. Being said, looking forward, steps in the right direction, all of that lovely business. So yeah, let us know your thoughts as usual. Get at us on the City Ramble social medias. Get involved in the Discord as well if you wanna come tell me face to face. Well, not face to face because it's online, but you get what I mean. Link to that is in the description. Until next time, it's been a pleasure, and we will see you later.